Good evening and welcome back to our sparkling conversations about sleep. Obviously, it is late in the evening and we are not trying to put you yet to bed. And I'm here again with my partner in conversation and reflection, Cheryl. Hi, Cheryl.
Good evening, everyone.
And tonight we are continuing our journey through the book, Why We Sleep. And,
Indeed.
it's always good to have it here, Why We Sleep. And we use this as an itinerary through the topics, as an opportunity to touch upon different aspects that we found interesting in the book. And the previous conversation, which you can find in the text, actually, the link to the video, in case you're interested to watch, you can find it in the text. The previous conversation talked about part one in the book, and it was this thing called sleep, and it touched upon the relationship with caffeine and jet lag and melatonin, and also a little bit how sleep is changing through the ages.
Correct.
And this time, part two is focusing on why you should sleep. Yes, and that will be a bit of a focus on the benefits, but also on the consequences of lack of sleep. And
Correct.
this is where we start a little bit. And yeah, Cheryl, what would be the best, I don't know, heading into conversation?
Well, I do know that when we were preparing for the conversation, that we talked about the sleep architecture that was mentioned in the book a bit earlier than the chapters that we are discussing today. But I think it was a good reminder of how the sleep cycles and the stages within such a sleep cycle might not have resonated with with the people, and we thought of bringing it up one more time just to kind of get it clear again for people to know what these stages are and what actually is a sleep cycle. Perhaps that might be handy. And another reason why we were mentioning this is because one of the stages was related to memory and how, in a specific stage, the memory was consolidated best.
Indeed.
So that might be one way to start off our conversation.
Indeed. So we said, and I'm not sure how clear this image is because it's
Hmm.
always interesting how we see it and how it's seen at the end, but we hope it is clear enough.
Yeah,
If you, by the way, as always, if you have any questions or any comments, feel free to address it in the comments, whether you're watching us on Facebook or on LinkedIn, live or later on. We always appreciate, and then we come back to you with answers if there is a question. So we're starting our conversation tonight because indeed we felt that when going through the benefits and the consequences of lack of sleep, this might have been important to show
correct.
and go through it a little bit. And maybe you can walk us through it. We have three
Sure.
images
In-
to show. It's this one and the other one with the sleep cycle. So, what would be very important for people to maybe keep in mind?
Well, on average, what makes good night's sleep is having gone through at least 4 to 5 cycles of sleep. And you can see in the graph how the cycles are basically included with stages of sleep. And the
Mhm.
5 stages are the stage 1 and 2 non-REM sleep, and non-REM standing for non-rapid eye movement. Stages 3 and 4 of non-REM sleep, which is considered the deep sleep. And then you have the REM sleep, the rapid eye movement, which is also called the dream sleep. And as you might see in the graph, you kind of start off in a wake state and then go through the REM stage, going towards the non-REM stage 1 and 2, and then you have a longer period or longer duration of the stages 3 and 4 non-REM. And as soon as you go actually into the next cycles, you can see that the stages 3 and 4 are becoming a bit shorter, and that the REM sleep, for example, in stage 4, in cycle 4 and 5, are much longer, just to show how it actually evolves through the night. What I can also say is that the first 3 cycles of sleep are also known as the core sleep. And one sleep cycle is on average around 90 minutes to 120. So it's always nice to experiment what your cycle looks like, because for one person it can be more towards the 90-minute range, but for another person that might be 120. So 4 cycles of sleep might look different for many people. So that's kind of in a bit of in a nutshell what a sleep cycle is, how many sleep cycles there on average should be in a night to talk about a good night's sleep, and the core sleep having the included the first 3 cycles. Yeah.
Indeed. So, and I think with this, with the sleep cycles, there's a couple of things. So the rapid eye movement, we tend to dream towards the morning, or we remember the dreams towards the morning, and that is explained if you look into this, because we have more rapid eye movements or more REM sleep. You
Mm-hmm.
see it's towards 5, 6. So that's why when you actually naturally, the light is coming out, and the adenosine, it is the least quantity right in your body, and we naturally are going to wake up. It's overlapping that period,
Mm-hmm.
of or stage of sleep,
Mm-hmm.
and you have much more rapid eye movement, and your brain is very much active, I would say, in that
In the
state.
REM sleep, it's really the most active, so to say. Correct. Yeah.
Indeed.
And interesting of REM sleep is that whilst your brain is so active, your body is kind of put in a sort of lock, just to make sure that you're not acting out on whatever you might be dreaming. Because can you imagine running away from a monster or anything of that sort, and you really acting out that dream, and then getting out of bed and running as such? So it's amazing how the body has been developed as such to remain in that position whilst the REM sleep can do its job.
Exactly. It's like being, and of course, that we are going to explore more about dreaming because it's in part 3.
That's
But yeah, it is quite interesting. And also, I think if only looking here, it is
true.
why that if something actually happens unexpectedly, and whether they're children that are growing up and waking out through sleep, or something happening over the night and it's pulling
Hmm.
out of a deep sleep, you
Yeah.
can, for instance, take a while, there is sleep inertia, and also you can find yourself with a bit of a headache, because your blood pressure is maybe a little bit low, and it takes a while, so if you move from deep sleep to running, that might have an effect on your body.
Hmm.
So it depending on where your sleep gets interrupted
That it makes
during.
it more difficult to actually feel awake. Correct.
Exactly. So this is also something maybe to keep in mind, why you feel certain way
Indeed.
if your sleep gets interrupted. Now,
Correct.
um, I think anything else that we want to add? I think that was a good
And
introduction, right? Of
no,
the.
the only thing that I would like to add still is that between the cycles, it could be that you are in your lightest of stages of sleep. And that is the stage where you are also actually kind of subconsciously scanning if you're still safe, if you have any pain, if you need to go to the toilet. And that is actually the stage where people tend to wake up and to do the things that I just mentioned, and could have issues falling back to sleep. But what I wanted to mention with this is how it's very normal to be waking up multiple times during the night because of the way the stages within the cycles of sleep um, develop. Yeah.
Okay, and also that to consider that, yeah, if you can get to know or get intimate with your own sleep cycle, so you kind of get to know yourself whether you're within the range of 90 minutes or
Indeed.
120. And I think you can do that with observation indeed, because if you know that you tend to wake up between this, you kind of can journal it a little bit and figure out. Also, you can know how to manage your sleep, so in a
Mhm.
way that you give yourself sufficient sleep cycles, even if you need to reduce the duration, but at least you do not kind of interrupt the sleep cycle if it's
Mhm.
needed. So that could be also quite insightful for you to be self-empowered in how you
Mhm.
manage your
Yeah.
own sleep.
And interestingly enough, that's why they also recommend if you take a nap during the day to not go beyond the 20-30 minutes range, because um, this is when you actually kind of go into that
Deep sleep.
deeper sleep. Correct. Correct.
Yes, and I think that takes quite a bit away a large quantity of adenosine from your body,
And,
sufficient to push your start of the sleep. So yeah, that's what also I've learned, that it's good for this NRNM and stages 1 and 2. So you
mhm.
have like a quick, and this is also why we say, if you're a parent, you know that the power nap, right? So you're driving and your kid is fine, and then he
Yeah.
falls asleep in the last 10 minutes, and then he's like, obviously, by the way, the sleep cycles and what you mentioned, this is for adult life, because for
Correct.
children actually it is different, right? So through
That's true. I'm not really an expert on kids, but they could fall into that deeper sleep much faster. Correct. Yeah.
Indeed. So I think with that, and if you navigate through the book, you will see that actually the deep sleep, it's much longer at the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
and also the cycles are shorter. Because I remember when we were supposed to train our children, on how to sleep and things
Okay.
like that. We were talking with the pediatrician, and he was mentioning that, yeah, at the beginning it's 30 minutes, then it's moving to 45,
Exactly.
this sleep cycles, and then towards adulthood you get to 90 minutes, as you said, and 120. So
Certainly.
there is
Sure.
something there to look at the cycles, that actually the duration, it is changing with the age
Yeah.
and the
Indeed.
components of the
Indeed.
of the of the cycle. Now,
Correct.
that being said, well, cycles or not, cycle or not, it's
We're going
let's
into indeed.
yeah, into the benefits, right?
True.
So, what are the benefits of sleep?
Well, interestingly enough, I have this little text called "Amazing Breakthrough," which is actually the start of the first chapter of this part that we're discussing today. And I thought it was so nicely written. Scientists have discovered a revolutionary new treatment that makes you live longer. It enhances your memory and makes you more creative. It makes you look more attractive. It keeps you slim and lowers food cravings. It protects you from cancer and dementia. It wards off colds and the flu. It lowers your risk of heart attacks and stroke, not to mention diabetes. You'll even feel happier, less depressed, and less anxious. Who's interested? And when I read it, I thought, wow, just in a nutshell, I mean, so many things have been named for which sleep actually benefits too. But maybe we can talk a little bit about the ones that uh, stood out,
Mhm.
because I can imagine, at least for me, when I had read this way back, um, I thought it was very interesting to read how, having sleep deprivation, it actually triggers two hormones related to food, to hunger, to be actually doing the opposite of what they should be doing. One being the feeling satiated, feeling sufficiently full, and the other one actually being the need for food, by lack of a better word. And when you haven't slept enough, how they work exactly the opposite, making you craving less healthy foods, wanting more, and just not feeling full enough when you've actually eaten more than sufficiently already. So, can you imagine how that actually is helping us to also be able to maintain a good weight, for
Well,
especially a lot of people? Yeah,
yes, in an age in which, unfortunately, obesity is an increasing
yeah,
issue,
yeah.
and especially for children, and
Hmm.
maybe sometimes we don't make this correlation between sleep and, you take a child with obesity and you say, oh,
Exactly.
go to a nutritionist, and you start, it's, of course, it's multiple things because it's not only one, but hardly any doctor talks about the connection or the impact
Between,
between the relationship
correct.
between sleep and weight gain and obesity. So this
Exactly.
is quite an easy gain, so to speak. You don't need to buy anything. You don't need to stretch. You just need to take care
I
and
always
see
call
how.
it the free ingredient for so many benefits. Another thing that was mentioned that also really resonated with me is how sleep is kind of seen as the global health insurance provider, meaning that it actually, gives or has a prescription for any ailment, whether it's physical or mental. So it's such a fundamental thing to, yeah, to have plentiful of and lots of quality of.
Indeed. So it is, as we were saying there in the presentation, so of course the journey through the benefits, it start the benefits for the brain. I think you can't talk about, I think benefits and sleep deprivation, they go hand in
Hand in
hand.
hand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And I have to say, we do live in a society that it's more rather focused on remedial and on minus. So that's why when we talk, so let's talk about the effects of lack of sleep
Rather
because
than the benefit.
rather
Correct.
than the benefits,
Yeah.
because that might be interesting, to
Hmm.
know that when you take a shortcut and you say, yeah, I'll be fine with 4 hours of sleep, or I'll be
Hmm.
fine with 5 hours of sleep, what are actually the effects that can appear on your entire body. And I think there's quite a lot. I mean, when we look, and I think that kind of was the spirit of the book in a way, because
Correct. Yeah.
the book intends to create an awareness
Indeed.
about, yeah, what can happen when you consciously or unconsciously go for less sleep.
Hmm.
The benefits that are described, they are on the brain, so in the
Hmm.
functioning of the brain.
Yeah.
And they also very much focus around the learning and the memory,
Correct.
right? So
Yeah.
this is what is focused. And I think what is maybe important, what stayed with me,
Hmm.
from that part, was that during the day we accumulate a number of information, and that are kind of stock. So into, let's say, before you put it and you
Hmm.
organize it, right, which
Correct.
sleep does. This is
True.
it's an important function for sleep. They stay in hypothalamus, I think it
Yeah.
is.
Or
That's
the
the place.
hippocampus, I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
hippocampus.
Correct.
Hippocampus.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in hippocampus.
Correct.
Yeah, and then that is like a, well, you can see like a room because it has a limited space, and
Mm-hmm.
then from there it needs to be shifted. Yeah, so it's like over the night we close the storage. Now we have all of these items, and
Mm-hmm.
then they need to get moved.
It's
And
actually kind of like an inbox.
exactly. And then what is happening
Yeah.
if we don't get any sleep or we get too little sleep? And how is this impacting the memory? And then
Mm-hmm.
you have short term memory and long term memory. And what the book is kind of describing, it's studies that were done with students because, hey, yes, you're young and beautiful, but when you
Yeah.
study, you are
Mm-hmm.
focusing on education and on learning.
Yeah.
And what were some of the findings, Cheryl, there?
Well, some of the findings were that not only does sleep help with retaining what you have learned during the day after you have slept, but also that in order to be able to learn and to gain or to be able to create the new memories or the new information, that sleep was needed to be able to do that. So, actually, prior to the learning, sleep made such a huge impact, as well as after the learning itself. And you mentioned how the hippocampus, kind of being an inbox, so to say, has a limited space that it can have information be stored. And it's during indeed this sleep where that storage is kind of being shifted towards the long term memory. And it's towards the long term memory where it then gets saved. Like the save button is being used to be able to have those memories be there, and in order to not be forgotten. Yeah.
Yes, and I think that was, of course, with studies, it was shown, and there
Hmm.
were different groups,
Yeah.
and then obviously they asked them to give back what they have learned, right? So
Indeed.
this is how they discovered, and also they have put the students. I think they've put them into the MRI so they could
Hmm.
observe they could observe the brain activity when they were doing all of this and to see which parts of the brain are lighting up. So this is kind of how they noticed that actually it wasn't the hippocampus that was lighting up. So that was lighting up at the
Hmm.
beginning during the day.
Yeah.
And after that, when you retrieve the information, it was from different areas of the brain
Yeah.
where the long-term memory was stocked. And
Being
also they
stored.
could see, yeah, and then those groups had different prescription into how much to sleep. Some of them didn't sleep, some of them slept 4 hours, some of them. So it's quite interesting to read all of those
Hmm.
details. But
Yes.
I think what is very, very important, what we hear, from parents, maybe when they say, do not try to feed the pig. This is what we would say in Romanian, it's like, do a white night before an exam, and then,
And to do an all-nighter and really pump all the
all of the
studies.
information and everything,
Yeah.
because students tend to do that, like you leave it on the last
I
moment.
remember mine.
I remember mine as well, inevitably.
Yeah.
But sleep is very, very important because if you study all night and then you go to the
Hmm.
exam, what they noticed is that what memories are very weak. They're kind of
Yeah.
not really organized because they didn't have time to rest, and be saved. And
Literally saved, true. Yeah. So
and
it
you
remained
can't
a very short-term memory.
exactly. And what is happening actually in the long run, you will not remember those things. Even if you manage to pass the exam, they
Exactly.
will not move over and they will not translate because they didn't have a night of sleep
And
after.
perhaps even multiple nights
Exactly.
when they studied. Correct. Yeah. Indeed.
Yes.
Good one to
And
mention.
Yeah, so maybe good to think. So when you need to study for something very important, to sleep to or account for that as a preparation. So put it on the list. Need to sleep. Yes, not only need to learn in order for everything to
But
settle
especially if
down.
you indeed, if you had the choice of sleeping more or learning more, sleep is the condition to have to be in place before you are able to learn what you want to learn. Yeah. So
Right. So then you did, and then you here you have about knowledge with memory,
mhm.
but there's also like motoric skills, right? There was an
Yeah,
example about the
the
pianist
pianist.
player you were
I thought
saying.
it was beautiful, and how it baffled the writer because he had not heard of this yet. But there was this pianist who mentioned how he would be playing this um, how do you call this piece of music, and practicing, coming towards the end, and towards the end he would just not be able to finish the last part of this piece. And he noticed that when he had a full nights of sleep, it's almost like this gap where he couldn't complete what was missing, that it was being finished during his sleep, because the night after or the morning after he was able to finish it eloquently. And that was something that had baffled the writer Matthew Walker himself so much that he indeed initiated this study to figure or find out indeed how this works. And they came to the conclusion that it's not necessarily practice that makes perfect, but practice with sleep that makes perfect. And memory, um, so the memory muscles, so to say, are also actually brain muscles. So by training that, yeah, with sleep, you would be able to get more perfect with whatever you needed to do.
Yes, and also if you set the like an intention, so even
Hmm.
you can your muscles can actually practice. There are
Yeah,
very small movements in the muscle that actually remain active or
correct.
get activated. And I think they get activated during the rapid eye movement, because in
Hmm.
there, as you said, our body are kind of locked. So there is a mechanism that blocks the motor. So from a motoric perspective, the
Yes.
body doesn't go anywhere, and then the activity of the brain is very intense. But then while you're not going anywhere, your muscles are, they can practice during sleep, which
Well,
is
indeed, it's almost like they are being developed during our sleep to be um, to be made complete. And this stage of sleep that is responsible for this particular function is actually very noticeable with toddlers when they are going from the crawling stage to the starting to walk stage, because there the motoric is indeed highly in development between the crawling and the next development being the walking. And they actually found out that it's the stage 2 non-REM sleep that actually was way more present with these young children.
yeah. So I
Yeah.
think that that was a bit, and maybe it's also good to mention that aside of um, memory, and learning, you have
Hmm.
creativity, and creativity depends how
Yeah.
you define it. But creativity is this possibility of creating synergies and connections and all of it. And I think sleep is also very valuable because you go with a number of information.
Hmm.
So besides things getting kind of transformed and put into the long memory,
You
um,
can actually see patterns perhaps or relations better, and giving you yeah, these new ideas that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise.
Yes, and I think Einstein was the one who was mentioning, and there are quite a number of important science people that they would. And again, we're going to touch about lucid dreaming because I think that played a role, but that is a little bit different, and it's coming in the next part. But there were people that were setting an intention or would live with a problem to sleep,
Hmm.
and then they would wake up, or they would have immediately next to them, and they
Yeah,
developed a sort of a technique to use this part which seems to be inactive, but actually to send their brain on a mission during the night.
indeed. Yeah, very true. Hmm.
So we're moving from this topic, and I think we're talking about the sleep deprivation.
Yes.
And you already mentioned a little bit on the metabolism, which is connected
Hmm.
with
With
gaining
yes,
weight and obesity, right?
indeed.
Maybe you want to say something, I think, about attention, right? Attention is very much about where our field of consciousness, what
Hmm.
comes towards us, and attention is quite important these days, especially when we talk
Attention
about
and concentration, of course. Indeed.
attention and
Give me,
concentration. Yes,
Alina, give me one moment. I'll be back just to close the door.
yes, no problem. And I can hear you are with us, so
I'm
that's
back.
absolutely yes.
That's the nice
So
thing about being
talking
live.
about attention, I saw you. Yes.
Yes,
So attention and concentration are heavily impacted by sleep deprivation. And you were telling me something about it before we started.
correct. They did this a huge study on different groups of people to see how their concentration would be, how it would be after different hours of sleep. So there was this one group that actually had a full 8 hours of sleep, sleeping the 8 hours for 2 weeks. Then the next group, 6 hours, another group, 4 hours, and the fourth group, 3 nights of no sleeping. And there they found out how, I think there were three conclusions that they had. One being that for brief moments, because these respondents then every day had to do these tasks of responding to it's almost like, how do you call that,
The stimuli.
a stimuli indeed, and then responding to the games or whatever they would be presenting to the respondents. And with the hours of sleep they could then check how quickly these respondents were actually acting. And for the group in the 3 night total deprivation, their missed responses were almost like 400% increased. The impairments continued after the second and third night, and you would expect that it would kind of flatten out at some point, but it was still escalating after that. For the 4 hour sleepers, after 6 nights, their performance was just as bad as those who had not slept for 24 hours. And let me see, for the people that actually slept 6 hours a night, after 10 days, their performance was impaired compared to somebody who had not slept for 24 hours. And why I thought this was so shocking, I would say, is if you look at how many people sleep on average, especially in industrialized world countries, um, we are going towards those numbers between 5, 6, 6.5 hours, and just to show how your performance is impaired already so much after, what did I mention, about 6 days, 11 days, and how many people are actually suffering from sleep deprivation and, yeah, might be functioning in this way for so much longer. And
Yes,
another,
and
Yeah.
Yeah. No, no.
Another thing that actually came out is how a sleep deprived brain cannot assess how sleep deprived he or she actually is. And that is something which is quite alarming, especially if you look at, for example, driving and feeling drowsy. So, one thing that I would definitely like to mention is if you ever feel drowsy when needing to drive, please stop. Please make sure to find, another alternative if you can, or um, take measures so that you are not a danger for other people in traffic.
Well, and for yourself, of course, because as
Oh,
you are saying,
yeah.
is um the thing is that they appear to be micro sleeps, right? So moments of
That
micro
happened.
sleeps, and
Yeah,
that can happen even for a couple of seconds. And
yeah.
of course, you can imagine what could happen um, if you close your eyes for a microseconds in a
Mm.
busy traffic on a motorway, or
Yes.
even passing through an area where there's like children or animals or things
Hmm.
like that. And it is enough, you wouldn't even notice, you wouldn't register, because if you shut down in the micro sleep, you won't record it, and you would say that nothing happened. So you could, but it it only takes
Yeah.
a couple of seconds. And I think that is that is behind
Mhm.
all those messages that we see. We see that the cars are kind of these days, modern cars, my car is kind of saying after 2 hours, take control of your steering. So it is designed that to prompt you to take a break.
Mhm.
Also those messages that you have on the motorway, because there are so many accidents about things.
Definitely.
Yes.
Definitely. Yeah.
And it's all connected to sleep. And many times we say, yeah, and we see, sometimes you pop into a gas station and you don't go for a can of water, everybody goes for a Red Bull. And actually, there was this thing, I mean, ultimately it's about caffeine or things like that. And the
Hmm.
book is saying, yeah, would the nap help? Yes, in a very short time, of course, it would help,
Hmm.
like for driving, most likely. Just pull over, sleep, as we said, half an hour. That will
Well,
take you for
actually,
a while.
minutes then. Yeah. Indeed.
Yes. It won't help you, with decision making or with memory or with learning or maybe with emotions, because we
But it
haven't
can.
touched
Yeah. It
about
can
that. But
refresh you sufficiently to be able to continue, but one reminder would definitely be not to start driving straight away, but to really become refreshed well enough, because when you have such a short nap, you can still suffer from something called sleep inertia, where you have that kind of dazed, dizzy, um, cotton-like feeling in your head. So that really needs to kind of, settle down before you hit the road again. Yeah. And in the end, I would also like to remark, naps are not replacing structural sleep.
no, and they are like what is it? An emergency tool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is
It
an
can be
emergency
supportive,
tool.
but not to replace a good night's sleep.
So
Yeah.
is caffeine.
True.
So is
Very
caffeine.
true. Yeah.
Continuing this journey about sleep deprivation, and I think we
Hmm.
we saw that it has obviously, because we talked about the benefits of the sleep on the memory. Obviously,
Hmm.
if you because I noticed, even I have some friends that I have a very good friend of mine, and she's a consultant, and sometimes when she has projects and part of this. The thing is, they actually she's mentioning this, like, in the last period of time, I can't remember, I don't know what's happening with my memory. It's like I can't remember a lot of things. And
Yeah.
when reading this book, I made this connection, and I said, hey, I think it's also because if you don't give yourself enough sleep in a certain period of time,
Hmm.
Obviously, when you are awake, you might not register certain things, or the information is not going to have the possibility to actually settle down lot, so you
Hmm.
won't memorize it.
Yeah.
Now, I have to say, I'm really happy we tonight, it seems, Cheryl, we have some comments here, and I
Oh,
see that,
really?
yeah,
Okay.
I think we have a comment from Sebastian, who happens to be my husband. Um, and he's saying
Hi,
that many,
Sebastian.
yes, hi Sebastian, and hi Andrea. So Sebastian and Andrea are with us. So Sebastian is
Lovely.
saying that many people in IT and in cybersecurity,
Hmm.
domains notorious for chronic sleep deprivation, complain about attention deficit problems. And that leads us to believe to ADHD and ADD, and maybe sometimes people, they just go and they assume that they have a problem, but I think they sometimes miss the connection.
Okay.
And he is mentioning also, I wonder how many of these attention problems are actually rooted in lack of sleep. Yes, that is very
That could,
correct.
that could definitely be the case. Yeah.
Yeah, so that
Indeed.
would be indeed that when you hear somebody that is kind of complaining
Mhm.
about this attention problem, I would say that the rule of thumb, and of course, we're no doctors and, we're coaches, we're
Mhm. Yeah.
psychologists, but the rule of thumb is prescribe yourself, but at least I would say, because when you think of a change, you think of at least 60 to 60 days. So prescribe yourself a consistent sleep pattern for
Hmm.
7 8 hours per night for at least 3 months, and see if
Hmm.
there is any improvement.
Improvement.
Observe.
Indeed.
Yeah.
But I think what Sebastian is saying does relate back to what we happened to mention about the hippocampus.
Yeah.
If that hippocampus is full and um, you're not getting or giving it the time and attention with getting structural sleep, the information cannot be shifted to the long-term memory. So what happens is the information that's already in there remains, but new information can also not be taken on board. So can you imagine that attention span becoming shorter and shorter? I sometimes have it with my husband as well. I can see when I'm talking to him, it's kind of like you can say something and you can just see how it's not being registered literally. So
It's
it's
not that
interesting.
there is
Yeah,
no more space. No
there's
more space. It's
literally,
crowded here.
indeed, but it's literally like that inbox is just full, and therefore no more can be put on. Yeah, it's saying it's full and it needs to be yeah.
Well,
Um,
organized, or released,
um,
or moved on into a different chamber.
right. Yeah.
Also, I see here Andrea is with us, and she's saying, speaking of night owls, bears, early birds, how
Mm-hmm.
can we train our brain into a slightly different pattern or chronotype due to the life work demands? And I
Ooh,
guess,
yeah,
yes, that's a good one,
definitely.
Cheryl.
And I can
Yeah.
imagine it depends on which of the chronotypes you are, but the one that suffers the most from, I would say, the average, you know, times that society holds on to, whether it's in school, whether it's in the office, and so on, tends to be somewhere around between 9 to 5, so to say. It's the night owls that seem to suffer the most from that, and the night owls in the animal kingdom then would be kind of the wolves and the dolphins, but the dolphins are more kind of towards the insomniacs. So there are multiple things that you could do. Is exercising is really a great way to get the heart pumping, to increase the adenosine, which is the hormone that actually helps with the sleep pressure to be built up. Um, and it also really helps with more deep sleep, and especially if you have more intense workouts. Another thing that you can do is really go outside, get as much daylight as soon as possible in the morning, because as soon as you have that, it will also help you to kind of shift your going to bedtime a bit more to the front. So the earlier you wake up, the more sleep pressure you can then build up, and the more towards the front your sleeping routine will can become.
Yes. Well, I think, and I think it's that. And for instance, I consider myself a night owl. If you let me naturally, I will, end up going to bed naturally. I can see, I can see myself yawning with all of those things that appear
Mm-hmm.
naturally. I don't drink
Yeah.
coffee. I don't drink black tea. I stay away from green tea in the evening. So I'm very
Mm-hmm.
aware. But if you leave me, it's like I fall asleep between 12 and 1, and I wake up
Mm-hmm.
naturally between 8 and 9. So
Yeah.
clearly it's 8 hours sleep starting, but that is my shift. And then obviously you have children, you need to wake up.
Yeah.
So I've experienced along the time, depending on the demands, I've also went to bed at 9 and woke up
Mm-hmm.
at 5.
Yeah.
Yes. And that worked well as long as I contracted with my body, and I set an intention,
Mm-hmm.
and I find a way to relax. And I was tired enough physically, as you said. So
Mm-hmm.
if it's not only to be mentally tired, but you also need to be physically tired in some
Mm.
shape or form.
But I would like to kind of make a little correction there, to
Hmm.
go to bed sleepy and not tired, because with tired, it can be that you are not sleepy enough to be able to fall asleep. So to be careful with that. And
How
if
would you
you
see the
are,
difference, Cheryl? What would be the things that
the difference between sleepy and
tired?
I, well, with tired, you really feel physically, mentally, emotionally tired, exhausted, and low in energy. And
Hmm.
one thing that can help there is really taking rest or self care that can help with that. Um, Whereas when you're sleepy, it tends to be that you have heavier eyes, maybe you're blinking more, or you're nodding more, you're starting to yawn. Those are kind of the symptoms that you would get when sleepy. And when you get that, when the sleep pressure is high enough in order to be able to fall asleep.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you. I think it's a good reminder. We've talked
Yeah.
about it, but it's also good to reiterate this thing to
Mhm.
make a difference. So the tired kind of indicates a more systemic lack of energy in the
Yeah.
body. So then it is not only about sleep. It's already you got to a point where you need to look maybe to some lifestyle adjustments, or
Mhm.
things that give you energy. And okay, this
Yeah.
is not necessarily where we're going to go, but spending time in nature, doing things that
Yeah.
bring you joy, and shifting that a little bit. While this, what you said, sleepy, it's something else, and it is from
Mhm.
day to day and night to night. And
Yeah.
then it's also observe yourself, right? So you will know it's
Yes.
paying attention to your
Mm.
own body and to your own symptoms.
But also another thing that you can do if you're a night owl, and for example, like you said to Alina, going to bed at 12, waking up at 8, you can over time slowly and gradually bring those times a bit more forward. So, for example, for the first week, you try every night to go just 1/4 of an hour earlier to bed, but also waking up 15 minutes earlier. And then the second week, if that goes well, the second week, you kind of gradually bring another 15 minutes forward.
Yeah, and
And that's
feel where
kind of,
is that breaking point
yeah,
where
and
your
that's,
body. So
yeah,
to give your body the chance to come along, also
yeah,
into presenting those sleepy and build up that adenosine, so in such a way
yeah.
that you actually get naturally to
But
sleep.
another thing you can do is, for a short time to still go to bed at the same time, but wake up at the time that you need to because of work, school, or anything else. And what that does is, because you're doing sleep restriction there, is that you give yourself a little bit shorter of a sleep window, but therefore creating so much more sleep pressure because you're awake longer as well, which will help you in the evening to be able to go to sleep earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Andrea, we hope that this addresses your question, and by all means, feel free to reach out to us later on. And we're more than happy to think along if this helps. And coming back to where we were, and of course, we always see it. It's such a very good. We're very happy to have you along. Thank you, Sebastian and Andrea, and for your comments. We kind of always aim for 45 minutes, but there is such a richness of information.
And we still want to share as much as we can, of course, but maybe we can just dive into one or two topics with regards to the body, because we did go into the brain,
Yes.
less into the body, if that's fine. I think one thing that really resonated with you when we talked about it earlier is about the reproductive system, right?
Yeah, I mean there is when you get to hear, obviously the you and I, our children are kind of,
Hmm.
yeah, we
Yeah.
put that behind us. But what I hear from the young couples, being in that stage of wanting to have a child, many of them, unfortunately, there is an increase of difficulties in getting
Hmm.
pregnant, right, and in fertility. And actually, I think even we experienced at the time, when we were actually, I haven't ever heard about sleep deprivation being a cause or being connected to fertility. And I am wondering, in a
Yeah.
society when we have so much screen exposure, maybe a reduction in time spent outside in
Hmm.
nature, and a shortening of the life, sleep cycle, not sleep cycle, but sleep duration.
Hmm.
How is this having an impact? And of course, here it was also mentioned in the book about, so there are some studies that are being made, and
Hmm.
it was measuring the testosterone level, and the
Yeah,
fact that
indeed.
and they were looking at young people around their 20s, very very fit, and
Young
if
men, actually. Yeah.
yeah, and then if they would be limited to 5 hours of sleep for a week, actually they noticed that it would the level of testosterone will be so low, and
Yeah.
it was like you would be 15 years older, so they discovered this. It was a similar effect as of aging. And I think that is very, very important to know, because it isn't only for the reproductive system. It is a similar impact, I think, for Alzheimer, right? We haven't touched about that, but when they've
Hmm.
made studies, they saw that the sleep deprivation um, in young people, younger, well, 40s, 50s, it
Hmm.
kind of, if you look at people that what the damage that happened, or from age, the natural one will damage,
Hmm.
so
Yeah.
the aging of the cells and of the structure. The same type of effect was created by sleep deprivation. So the actual age of the body has increased quite a lot.
You mean with Alzheimer's or with the reproduction?
No, I mean with the lack of sleep. So if you observe the effect of a consistent lack of sleep,
Mm-hmm.
and you measure the performance or the level of certain um, how to call it, in the blood, so so
Hmm.
like the testosterone in this case,
Of
but
course, yeah.
also on
Hmm.
so the elasticity, so if we look at the cardiovascular system,
Yeah.
the state of the heart, of the tissues, of the blood vessels. So what has been observed, that actually the lack of sleep creates an degeneration of
Yeah.
cells and in the system, as it would be, as aging does.
Yeah. But indeed, it also, good sleep also helps you maintain a healthy heart. It helps to keep your blood pressure low. It helps to be able to have your glucose be absorbed. How does it work with insulin? That it works as it should work. And another thing that we were so surprised about, right, is how even the cell structure could be uh, damaged, or maybe not even well developed, meaning that the function that it should be messaging out is either just not done properly or maybe not done at all. And what kind of consequences could be coming from that? And that even with the DNA structure,
Yes. Yes,
it has
indeed.
such an impact. Yeah.
Yeah, so the studies show that the sleep deprivation, it's actually having an impact on the telomeres. And what are the telomeres? So when you have the DNA structures, in the
Hmm.
cells, the telomeres is like shoelaces. So actually, they are the heads that keep the shoelaces,
Together.
not, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, not to
Yeah.
shatter. And these are the telomeres, and they have observed that actually the lack of sleep, it is destructuring. Those telomeres are rupturing, and they can get destroyed in time, which
Yeah.
means that it leaves unprotected the content of the DNA cells, and that can be slowly impacted. And we know that a lot of the information of the function of the body, they are contained there. So you can imagine that once that remains exposed, it gives a space
Hmm.
for an alternation of that message that can trigger the body into wrong cycles, into
Yeah.
all of the commands,
Yeah.
and I think ultimately it can increase your risk for multiple things, from inflammation. And we know that the
Hmm.
risk of inflammation is on the basis of developing cancer,
Yeah.
for instance. Yes. It To many other things, because if I, for instance, if I think, even dementia, there are certain types that you can have already, maybe a genetic or a message that goes wrong into those cells, but the sleep deprivation can accentuate or accelerate
Hmm.
the destruction of those messages. And that, I don't think it's very known, that actually by not sleeping
That it's
enough.
but actually, if I can, dive a little bit more into the Alzheimer's, is how sleep, and especially in deep sleep, um, the toxicity that is being built up in your brain from that day is being cleansed by the deep sleep. And another thing that was also mentioned is how it's almost, there was this really beautiful comparison of, imagine it to be like your brain to be like this huge building, and with the deep sleep the building actually decreases in size, so that the cells that are actually going to clean up these proteins that are actually related to Alzheimer's can actually access the building, or so to say, the part where this is actually located, can clean it up better. How remarkable is that? That it works like that. But by aging, we know that the older you become, the less deep sleep you are experiencing. And it is this deep sleep that actually helps with the cleansing, or detoxifying of what is built up in your brain. Um, so there are studies in how this can actually be more stimulated or reversed, so to say, so that Alzheimer's can be at some point, yeah, be treatable. Yeah, but
Yeah, so
lack
there
of,
are treatments that look to actually prescribe sleep for this, or
but
to
actually,
see.
or bad sleep could be an indicator of going to develop Alzheimer's. Yeah. And
Indeed.
other dementia related illnesses. Yeah.
Well, I realize that we're kind of on the hour with our conversation, but before we leave, maybe it is good to mention just one thing, because
Hmm.
in March we're going to have again the change, at least for well, not
Correct.
everybody's opinion observing this.
Daylight savings.
Daylight savings. We're going back to summertime. Fantastic. Which means that I think in somewhere, I'm not sure where, in March, I
Hmm.
think the last Sunday of the March or something
Correct.
like this.
Last Saturday of, I think it's 25th of March from the top of my head.
Yes, Saturday, exactly. So we're
Yeah.
going to do this again. And it is maybe to say that we're going to sleep 1 hour less,
Correct. Yeah.
which connects to that sleep deprivation. And it also might be good to mention again that there were studies made on the fact
Mhm.
that they have noticed that with 1 hour, just 1 hour of sleep
Of less
less,
sleep. Yeah.
there was an increase in
Heart attacks and strokes. Yeah.
heart attacks, strokes,
Yeah.
much more accidents,
Indeed. Yeah. Yeah.
and yeah, I think there is just keep it in the back of your mind. And I think
Mm.
Cheryl was saying already, well, can we do something about this? I think it is the awareness of it.
Yeah.
It's also more maybe in the planning, because this is going to impact us, I think, for a week at least after
Hmm.
this is happening, until our body is adjusting with this hour in minus.
Hmm.
Yes, and then consider all of this when planning your activities.
Definitely.
I
Well,
think in the first week of
especially
April.
for the people that kind of suffer from this for a longer time, one thing that can really help is the week prior to the daylight saving starting, is to, to go to bed 15 minutes earlier every day for 4 to 5 days. And by the time that the clock changes, then you should be gradually be into the new time.
Yes. So I think, well, with that, I think we would recommend, if anybody wants to, you can just go to this, why you should sleep, So I think in this book, and you can look at the content and then focus on the things you feel the most that speaks to
That
you. But
resonates with you the most. Yeah.
exactly. But the thing is, we continue our journey next time. And I
Mm,
think the
gonna be
next
an
part,
interesting part coming up.
yes, because it's about dreaming. So, as we were
Yeah.
mentioning it, and I
Yeah.
hope you found it interesting to learn a little bit more about the benefits and the consequences of sleep deprivation. And yeah, Cheryl, what should we say at the end?
Well, how would we like to end our conversation? Well, I think we've mentioned in many ways how important sleep is always, but to be aware of the consequences and the effects of having a lack of it, and that indeed only just 1 hour or 2 hours can already create such impairments on your performance, on your memory, on your learning.
Your
Uh,
decision making and also your emotion
Well,
reaction.
that's
We
one thing
haven't
that we
talked
didn't
about that.
mention is indeed the mental side of it, because how many mental illnesses are actually all related as well to sleep? I believe there's not one mental illness where people are sleeping well, so to say, just to show how related it is. Not necessarily which one is causing the other, but that they are indeed uh, very well related. And imagine, you know, to be able to wake up happy in the morning, having sufficient REM sleep, which is actually the first aid of your emotional side. If you've had sufficient of that, how you see the world so much happier, more positive than when you have not had this. Yeah. So it
Yeah,
really
when you
is
say that,
elevator. Yeah.
And when you say that, I'm thinking of all that depression that has been identified. And is
Mhm.
it, of course, I'm a psychologist, so I know, of course, there
Mhm.
are,
Yeah,
degrees and protocols and everything, but we sometimes look at the cause, but we do not necessarily see this connection with sleep. And I can't remember myself being trained and checking this or prescribing or anything.
indeed.
And
Mhm.
many times we go too easy into, or we it is too easy to go and prescribe a drug or anything. But I would like to challenge that for anybody. If
Mm,
take care of yourselves, just
definitely.
start by giving yourself um good sleep. And what good sleep is, and make baby steps, right? So it's, don't move from a minor, like 5 hours and aim for 8. Go for
Mhm.
5 hours and a half, 5 hours and 45, 6 hours, 6 hours and a half, because this is a sustainable change. And that's
Yeah,
that's I think what I want to leave you with. And of course,
indeed.
if you are sick, we didn't discuss about this, but if you're
For your
sick
immune system.
on
Yep.
your immune system, I think it's fluids and sleep. And the sleep, it's pretty much get yourself out of your, and trust the power and the wisdom of your body, because we have been created that naturally, when we get out of the way, we shut down our brains and we direct our energy towards the sleep.
Indeed.
Magical things can happen.
Definitely. Well, I think it's a really nice way to close off this conversation. But if there are any other questions or remarks, please share this with us, and we will come back on it.
Yes, indeed. So, thank you very much. We wish you a very smooth transition back
Indeed,
into the summer daylight and
summertime here. Yep,
summertime. And yes, may you sleep well and wake up rested.
definitely. Good night, everybody.
Good night.